joined by one of the best, a great Twitter follow. Make sure you follow him over on, well, not even Twitter now, X. Give him a social media follow. M Lombardi, NFL, and also Michael Lombardi. Michael, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, one of the things I actually saw one of your recent interviews yesterday with the Pat McAfee show.
When Mike Brown says he's going to pay somebody, I think there's probably a short list of people that he's ever said that about, right? Yeah. I mean, you can amen me on that one there. And I love Mike Brown.
As we're recording this, no Joe Burrow extension just yet, and I say yet because it does feel like it's coming. Could it be before the season? Could it be in the next hour? Or could it be after the season? Yes, it will happen at some point. But when it comes to this extension, I think you brought up a really good point. When Mike Brown says he's going to pay someone, he's going to pay him. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit when it comes to this Joe Burrow extension?
Yeah, well, I have great respect for Mike Brown and the whole Brown family. I just wrote a book called Football Done Right that really, if you're a Bengal fan and you're a Brown family fan, you should read because it really goes into the history of what Paul Brown's done for the game of football. And Mike was raised that way, and Mike understands through his background what greatness looks like. He's seen it, right? He's seen Jim Brown. He's seen Otto Graham. He's seen great players. And Joe Burrow is a great player. And I don't think Mike has ever had a problem paying for greatness. I think one of the Bengal players, Anthony Munoz, is one of my top-ranked players in all time. They've always paid for greatness. It's always the situation where I'm not so great, but I am good, that becomes the harder to pay for. So this is going to get done. There's no question. And I think both parties understand how it will get done. And one day we'll have an announcement and Joe Burrow will have a bigger bank account.
Yes, he will. It's just when and when it's going to happen for the Cincinnati Bengals, but kind of more on Joe Burrow and just what he's done as a franchise. Obviously, me being in Cincinnati, being around this team and what he's really done as a franchise quarterback, but somebody who's watching from afar when it comes to Joe Burrow's play on the field and just the franchise alone. What do you think about Joe Burrow as the quarterback?
Well, I think when your best player, as Jeff Van Gundy says, sets the tone of intolerance, that anything gets in the way of winning, you have a great culture. And what Joe Burrow has done for the Bengals is give them the culture. He's their best player. He's their hardest worker. He cares about team over I. He does everything you want. He's from a background that is really about winning. And so that permeates throughout the team. There's no selfishness in Joe Burrow. He's about winning games. If he has to throw 40 times, he will. He went into Buffalo with a backup offensive line. He didn't complain. He just won the game. He went into Tennessee with a backup offensive line and won that playoff game, right? He didn't complain about the call against Kansas City, unfortunately, on the roughness thing. He understands that it's a team sport. He knows how to win. This is what makes great teams, when your great players act and behave like Joe Burrow.
Yeah, kind of just staying with this offense. You obviously saw the news this offseason. Orlando Brown, they signed him as a left tackle. They moved Jonah Williams over to right tackle. It honestly feels like if everybody can stay healthy, it's going to be one of the best offensive lines that Joe Burrow has had in the NFL. What do you think about this protection for him?
Well, I think they've needed to. I think that's one of the areas, if you were to ask the Bengals objectively, where have they let Joe Burrow down? It's been in the offensive line. Not that they haven't drafted him, because, again, Mike Brown understands the importance of offensive linemen. He's put money into it. It just hasn't really panned itself out. They spent for Alex Kappa last year. They spent for Ted Karras last year. So they should be better. And I think Karras gives them some toughness up front. Orlando Brown will do that as well. So this will be the best line that they've had since Burrow's been there. It's going to be interesting how they utilize this line. Will they run the ball more effectively? Will Joe Mixon have the year that he had 2 years ago as opposed to last year? I think a lot of that to do with the offensive line.
What do you think about the running back room right now? Because I think there was a lot of criticism for Joe Mixon last year, and, he's hoping to have a bounce-back year. They need to be able to balance out their offense. I know they have all the weapons. I'll get to them in just a moment. But overall, when it comes to the run game with Joe Mixon, what are your expectations?
Yeah. I think Mixon's a really good player. I think, last year he must have been hurt. He wasn't the same guy. I think the interesting one is Perrine. How is that going to be utilized? Is it going to be Williams? Is it going to be Evans? Is it going to be Chase Brown? I don't know. And, preseason doesn't really give us that indication. It'll be the guy that pass protects the best that'll be in that role. Mixon can be in that role because Mixon's an effective pass catcher as well. So look, the one thing about the Bengals, we know they're going to be 11 personnel, one back, one tight end. And they're going to be able to spread the ball all over, and they're going to be in the right play because Burrow's smart enough to get him in the right place. Hard to fool defensively. So they're going to be able to put some points on the board because their receivers are good. They run great routes, and the system is built around what they do really well.
You talk about the good receivers. To be determined on if T. Higgins gets an extension this offseason or if maybe that's something looked at after this year. But T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, they get 2 rookies, 2 in the wide receiver room. What do you think about those rookies going into this season? Or what do you think about those wide receivers going into the season?
I think they're going to need a younger player to come and step up. I fully expect them to pay T. Higgins too because I think he makes Chase really good. Boyd they paid, but I think they've got to try to find a way to get an inside slot. It's rare to have somebody as big as Boyd play in there because when you have somebody that size that can play in the slot, they can run block in 11 personnel. Now, they're not going to block a defensive lineman, but they can block the corner and they can block the support player. So he gives them a running game out of 11 personnel on the weak side. So that helps. But I think when you start adding up the dollars, especially once you look at the Burrow contract, how are they going to offset that? And I think certainly you're going to have to give to get, right? You're going to have to be a little bit of, okay, we can't really have 3 receivers making big money. We can only have 2. But they need Higgins. I think Higgins really helps because when the coverage rolls to Chase, which it always will, Higgins is able to win one-on-one.
Yeah, we'll flip to the defensive side real quickly before we get to the AFC North talk. But a lot of talk concerns the safety room. Von Bell is gone. Jesse Bates is gone. They bring in Nick Scott in free agency. Dax Hill is really getting his first year in the NFL because it felt like he never got to play in his natural position during his rookie year because they weren't going to take Jesse Bates off the field. What are your expectations on the defensive side of the ball and safety a concern for you?
Well, it is in a communication standpoint. I think, that's going to be the key. Lou Anarumo does a great job of being able to get his defense coordinated from a communication level, everybody knowing what to do. I think Bates did a great job with that. Von Bell did a great job. Now, it behooves Scott and Hill. They're new to the system. And, the preseason doesn't give you that chance to really play and think fast, right? So I think that's going to be it's going to be an ongoing process there. I think that's going to be the key. And they're going to have to get their front's got to play at the same high level that they've been used to. But it's going to be some struggles early, especially with communication in the back end. And I think all the defensive staff know what lies ahead of them.
What do you think about Lou Anarumo coming back on this staff? I know he wanted to be a head coach, and it really feels like a lot of teams missed out on bringing Lou Anarumo as the head coach. But just overall, as the defensive coordinator and kind of getting that chemistry and that staff back on the defensive side of the ball.
I think it's huge, right? And I think when you really see Lou's talent is you see how well they play in the second half, how well he adjusts. I mean, the 2 championship games they've been to in the last 2 years, they did not play great defense in the first half, and yet they did in the second half. He's really good at adjusting the game plan to take away what the offense does once the game plan's unfolded. And I think part of it is, too, because he has a lot of players that have been in the system, whether it's Pratt, Logan Wilson. And I think getting the cornerback from Dallas, I can't say his last name, Awazu, that's really going to help tremendously. They need him back there because he kind of was their best coverage guy. How he'll react to the knee injury, I think we'll be interested to see, but he is their best cover guy.
Yeah, we call him Cheeto in Cincinnati. It's easier for a lot of people when it comes to
Cheeto, yes,
pronouncing, naming him. But overall, you look at the AFC, everybody knows it's loaded. We heard that talk last year, and now you get the Jets, they have Aaron Rodgers. But overall, when you look at rivalries, one of my favorites, maybe I'm a little biased, it's Cincinnati and Kansas City. What do you think about those matchups really going into this year, the Patrick Mahomes versus Joe Burrow?
Well, I think, right now with Kelsey's injury and looming right now, we don't know if he's going to play against Detroit tomorrow night. That certainly hurts. They're not the same team this summer offensively. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster, which, you could say wasn't a big loss, but he had 78 catches, 110 targets. I mean, that's a lot of production to lose. Somebody's got to fill that void. We just don't know who it's going to be. Without Chris Jones, they're not the same team defensively. Chris Jones is a problem for every team to block. So, look, I think Cincinnati's focus is really about the North. The North's really good, right? Pittsburgh's a much better team than they were when Cincinnati beat them 37-30 in the game in Pittsburgh, right? And Cleveland's a much better team than they were last year if Watson plays better, but they're all around better. And then, of course, you've got Baltimore with Lamar Jackson coming back. So I don't think, Lindsay, this Bengal team can start 5-4 this year and win the North. I think they're going to have to play early well to be able to win the North.
Yeah, you bring that up. I think you look at last year and the appendix, Joe Burrow coming off of that in the first game, not getting any preseason, putting on weight to get ready for week 1. They start 0-2, and you bring up just something that they can't deal with in divisional play because they have 2 AFC North games to begin the season. But overall, when it comes to the calf strain, I think the Bengals had a little bit of time. It really feels like Joe Burrow is back to 100%. I know Zach Taylor hasn't made it official that Joe Burrow will be back out there for Cleveland. But just overall, the AFC North, I feel like, and I know a lot of people how they feel about the AFC East. I feel like it's the toughest division in football.
Yeah, I think the North is. I think somebody's going to lose out, and it'll be a good team. But look, Burrow, he came back, and I think what's a misnomer about that Pittsburgh game was they just turned it over. I mean, their execution outside of the turnovers was very good, except they made too many mistakes starting early in the game. They played good defense, but they just turned the ball over. And it's a lesson that we all know. You turn this thing over and you give the other team so many chances, you're going to lose no matter how much you are better than the other team.
So what are your expectations for Joe Burrow, this team, and kind of you want to bounce back from that crushing AFC Championship loss, and hopefully they can get back to the Super Bowl. It isn't easy, especially in an AFC, but just overall expectations for the season.
Well, I work at DraftKings and VSiN, and so we're a betting network. And I had to fill out the guide. I had Cincinnati going to the Super Bowl against San Francisco. I think it's their time. I think it's going to be hard, but I think teams have to get to levels. I think you go from good to great. And when you're in the great category, you have to fight through some areas where you haven't been able to endure. Look, this team could have easily been to overtime in the Super Bowl if they called a false start on the Rams, which they didn't do before the Cooper Kupp pass interference. Right? We know that. The penalty against Kansas City, the return against Kansas City, they're close. And I think this is the year it all has to come together. But a lot of it's going to depend on Dak Hill and Nick Scott playing well early in the season, communicating the defense to everybody else. They'll be prepared. I don't worry about their offense as much as I worry about can they stop people in the year early, especially as they're going through the growing pains of the communication level.
So an MVP year for Joe Burrow? Are you taking?
I had that. Yeah, I did, Lindsay. I put that in the guide too. Yeah.
All right.
I thought it was a good play. It's 750 to 1, 7.5 to 1. So it's a good number. But look, the MVP will always come down to the player that has his team in the 1 or 2 seed in that conference. You're not giving it to a guy whose team's 7 seed or a team who's, not in the playoffs. That's not the MVP in the NFL. It's a quarterback award. And their quarterback has to play well and get his team a 1 seed or a 2 seed.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, we talked about getting off to a hot start for the Bengals is getting that number 1 seed. Getting that game out of Arrowhead should be the number 1 goal in the AFC overall because, look, they've been there. They won an important game in Arrowhead, but get it back home or try to get a few more home playoff games, and I think that will be really telling and helpful for them. And obviously,
they got to win the North first. They got to win the North first. You're getting too far ahead of yourself.
You're right. Zach Taylor would say the same thing. You got to win your own division first, and then you start to worry about everything else. And they know that. I think there's going to be 3 teams out of the AFC North in the playoffs.
They're good. It's a good one. And whoever starts slow, that's why this Cleveland game is important because Cleveland knows it. They would not have signed Hopkins as their kicker if they felt like, okay, it's going to be a long season. We'll go with Cade York. Maybe he becomes our Evan McPherson. They know how important that is. They went with Hopkins immediately.
And for some reason, Cleveland has just been a bad matchup for this Bengals team. What is that?
I think a lot. Look, they can rush the passer. They've taken advantage of the Bengals offensive line. Even when Williams was at left tackle, they can run the football and they don't mind running the ball. Nick Chubb's really good against them. And I think what's happened is that Cincinnati's not been able to play from in front. They've not been able to change the way the Browns play. When they do, it becomes more effective. I mean, they're 3-1 in the last 4 games against the Browns. They're 1-3, I should say, right? But one of those losses, the Bengals didn't care about. So I think to me, that doesn't matter as much. They have to be really well. They're well coached. The Cleveland will be better on defense. That's going to be the key. They're going to be much better on defense. And Cincinnati cannot allow to play from behind because all of a sudden Myles Garrett's a better player and Smith's a better player when Joe Burrow is under pressure. I don't care how much money you put in the offensive line. It's hard to pass protect when the opponent knows you've got to pass protect.
Yeah, 100%. I have a feeling Myles Garrett's going to be following Jonah Williams, even if he's on the other side. So we'll see what that looks like on Sunday. Again, Michael Lombardi, former NFL executive. You have a lot going on. Where can NFL fans find your work?
Well, we do a show every day on VSiN, on DraftKings Network, on VSiN. It's called The Lombardi Line. We do it from 1 to 3. I'm getting ready to do it right now. The GM Shuffle, which is a podcast that comes out every Monday and Thursday with Sammy Abebefe. I do that. I write The Daily Coach, which is a motivational newsletter with the great George Raveling, the former head basketball coach at Iowa, Washington State, and USC. So, yeah, and then I'm on Pat McAfee on Friday with him, and I get to enjoy the boys. So it's all good. I have a good thing going. I have a good thing going, Lindsay. It's really kind of fun.
Thank you so much. As you get ready for your show, for joining us, previewing a little bit of Bengals, Cleveland, and an outlook for the Bengals season in 2023. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate it. Good luck to you.